Welcome back to Reading as a Human Right. I'm your host, Lita Palmer. Today is Monday, August the 18th, 2025, and we begin our journey through Mississippi Rising, how the last became first, and literacy growth. Today we begin with the introduction forward. We dedicate this to my mother, who moved me to Mississippi when I was 13, not because she believed in the education, but she believed in the ability to make a difference here. I open with a quote from John F. Kennedy. We may not all have equal talents, but we should all have equal opportunities to develop the talents that we do have. Our foreword is brought to you by Lloyd Gray, who is the executive director of the Phil Hardin Foundation here in Meridian, Mississippi. He is also a primary funder of Illumination Center for Dyslexia. Without the support of the Phil Hardin Foundation, we would not be able to support as many students as we do. So he writes in the foreword, one of Mississippi's many paradoxes is that while it is the most fertile ground for literary genius, our state's literacy rate has perpetually dragged the bottom. Mississippi's great writers have not emerged from a culture widely steeped in reading, nor, for that matter, even the ability to read. The reasons for this are no great mystery. For most of its history, Mississippi intentionally neglected the education for its Black children and severely undervalued it for most whites. As an infamous early 20th century governor once declared, education just ruins a good field hand. A racist and class-based system built on the denial of a sound education and its most fundamental component, literacy, to the overwhelming majority of the population meant affluence for the few and poverty or close to it for most. That poverty, in turn, entrenched low literacy levels for generations. Mississippi, therefore, had much farther to go than most when it finally, if grudgingly, came to grips with the notion that every child in the state is owed the best education that the state can provide. The past several decades produced its series of fits and starts, with only spotty progress and a great inconsistency from year to year in policymakers' commitment to this task. In reading, the one area of education that is the foundation of all others, the state remained at or near the bottom. That seemed until recently almost an ordained state of nature. Then things began to change. Mississippi Rising is the story of that change. Leda Palmer, whose own professional journey as a dyslexia-focused educator placed her in the middle of it all, and she provides a comprehensive look at how Mississippi became a national leader in making the science of reading the foundation for its historic improvements in the reading level of its school children. As a state whose children were already so far behind in reading skills, Mississippi couldn't afford to continue squandering time and human potential with approaches to reading instruction that weren't based on solid evidence of how the brain works. As most of the rest of the country stayed bogged down in decades-old reading wars, Mississippi, thanks to passionate and, yes, headstrong individuals, along with a few visionary and effective institutions, got its act together. Central to the story is Mississippi's early leadership in dyslexia screening and training, and how the same principles that apply to teaching students with this common learning difference are connected to the wider gains in literacy that our state has made. The seeds for progress in literacy among the total student population were planted in the struggle to make the plight of those with dyslexia known and addressed. Leda takes us through the last 25 years of legislative and bureaucratic advances, prodded always by heroic educators who wouldn't give up, and relates how a network of connections led from one advance to the next, and ultimately to national recognition for the state as a model of how to do this work. It is an inspiring story of people who are willing to change if it meant better outcomes for children, even relearning everything that they thought they knew about how reading should be taught. It's about overcoming resistance to that change and, perhaps most importantly, giving Mississippi educators a reason to believe in themselves. Through it all, Leda weaves her own story, giving us the compelling personal experience and insight of one warrior in the battle. This story is both a celebration and a challenge. With all the progress, Mississippi is far from where it needs to be in reading levels of its children. Much work remains to be done. But for a state that has conditioned itself in so many ways to believe that it will always be last, This story is a powerful antidote to such despair. It shows what we as a state can achieve when we put our minds to it and work together. The dark and depressing side of our history doesn't need to define our future. Our treasured libraries of Native authors can and should be matched by future generations of well-taught Mississippi readers able and anxious to enjoy their work. Lloyd Gray, March 2022. Introduction. If you have been teaching since we sang along to 1999 like it was the distant future, then you know we have been through some monumental changes in education. Congratulations on playing the long game and not giving up. And if you have only been in the field since the millennium dawn, it is likely that you too have at least seen a few curriculums come and go. However, you were likely educated in a system lacking systematic phonics instruction yourself, and much of the science of reading may be brand new. If you have been in the classroom for less than 10 years, there is a chance that your undergraduate experiences better prepared you to teach reading. One way to gauge this is if what you were taught in college about how children learn to read did not match how you were taught in elementary school. For much of the United States and the world, this shift is just beginning. In Mississippi, we can trace these changes and the stories that accompanied them very clearly over the last 20 years. In 2001, as the nation grappled with how to improve education, and President George W. Bush was crafting what would become known as No Child Left Behind, Mississippi ranked last on the National Assessment of Educational Progress. Fast forward to 2019, and Mississippi was the only state to make positive gains in all areas on the NAEP. We were number 29 out of 52 in fourth grade reading, and only 11 states performed statistically higher. We have work to do for eighth grade reading, but progress can be seen, and our trajectory is much better than our neighboring states. How do you get that amount of growth in a place like Mississippi? The answers are as interesting as the rest of the Mississippi story. Throughout my lifetime, there has rarely been a time when Mississippi has topped a good list, save for a handful of times. We are far from being the best state in the reading, but we are the best in growth, and in my opinion, that is better. In the April 21 article from the Fordham Institute, Can Teaching Be Improved by Law?, they echoed the viewpoint, attributing the rise in literacy rates to the laws, professional development, and ongoing literacy coaching implemented across the state. Terry Stoops, director of the Center for Effective Education at Raleigh's John Locke Foundation, praised Mississippi's efforts toward increasing literacy rates. There is mounting pressure on legislators to try and replicate what Mississippi is doing, he said in that article. Hopefully, this book should help those in the state reform understand the history behind those reforms and the tireless efforts of teachers, administrators, legislators, and concerned parents who advocated for them. Reform means change, and change is never easy. Yet change is the essence of life and the catalyst for growth. After all, nothing good comes from remaining the same. Still, it is uncomfortable, and teachers, and even professors, teach as they were taught. Once, when attending a Mississippi Teachers Conference in Biloxi, the resistance to change within the educational system was on full display. Our speaker had begun with a rousing statement, "All change is good." Immediately, the murmurs of disagreement that erupted throughout the room as teachers started discussing how new curriculums and new administration and new positions contributed to the daily stress of the job. It seems as if the education profession had been subconsciously programmed to resist any form of change. However, I fully embraced my longstanding belief that change equals growth during that speech. I always gravitate toward challenges and find personal fulfillment in learning new things, braving new worlds, pushing the boundaries of a specified job. Being a lifelong learner meant that I would always figure out a way through a problem instead of avoiding it altogether. And my enthusiasm for learning and teaching was cemented when I was a candidate for student teaching at Mississippi University for Women in 1997. My philosophy of education had a core value by which I live still to this day. Never stop learning. My philosophy answered why I became a teacher, but it didn't answer how I would teach. My supervising professor was impressed with my research on motivation, behavior, and seemed pleased with my behavioral plans with preventive, supportive, corrective, disciplinary measures. Her only feedback had been good work, should work, good plan, should work, letter grades not assigned. Looking back, I realized I was never taught how to teach a child how to read. From an early age, I simply loved school, learning new subjects and getting lost in a book. I was in first grade when I decided I would become a teacher. We asked what we wanted to be when we grew up, and I proudly proclaimed I wanted to be just like Mr. Sposato, my first and second grade teacher. He had been that teacher who nurtured the spark that I had for knowledge and learning. Even when my parents would pull me out of school for a week at a time to visit family, I still completed my phonics drills and reading comprehension exercises, loving every minute of it. As my sister and I rode in our 1979 Silverado pickup truck to visit our grandmother in Mississippi, those early experiences with learning shaped my expectations of teaching, but they did very little to provide a roadmap for effective instruction. As I prepared this manuscript, I asked each educator about their formative years of education and how those experiences shaped their careers. This story is not just the story of teaching, it's Mississippi's story, one that encapsulates the dedication and the perseverance and the raw grit of those who have dedicated and continue to dedicate their lives to making our state a better place, to those that ensure that our children are raised in a world with more opportunities than we were given. Not all the educators that you will meet in this book will be from Mississippi, but without each of their contributions and commitment to our state's goal of increasing literacy rates, we would not have seen the dramatic rise in literacy rates over the past 20 years. This is our story. This is your story. Like many Southern states, stories are the bedrock of our culture in Mississippi. The stories you'll read in this book are a culmination of years spent in the classroom. These stories were relayed over Zoom interviews during our COVID-19 lockdowns. I began to realize that a version of our success that was being portrayed in the media was not the whole story, not the whole picture, and that those of us who have been working in schools, the nonprofit sector, and legislation might have something to add to this tale. I wanted to collect the voices and find the threads of truth that unite us. So I rekindled old friendships and fostered some new ones. I contacted Kelly Butler with the Barksdale Reading Institute and was invited to a weekly Zoom research to practice group. This group has become the source for much research on the science of reading that is fundamental to the book. The group of reading researchers from institutes, departments of education, and publishing teams from around the country, combined with some of the very best practitioners in the nation, are the very best part of my week. We agree that we have a ways to go in literacy, in America as a whole, and Mississippi specifically. There is something to celebrate in what has been accomplished in our state. It is essential to capture the story in this time, to honor and to celebrate everyone who was and continues to be instrumental in teaching children how to read, and reminds us as educators that we are the reason that change happens. The passion of every teacher and administrator who has seen the need to change how we teach reading continues to be the fuel that sustains the substantive change across our great state. Dr. Louisa Moats said it best: informed teachers are our best insurance against reading failure. While programs are beneficial, they do not teach. Teachers do. Dr. Moats, one of my most revered educational heroes, has been genuinely inspired by Mississippi changes, observing how remarkable it was that a state could make such dramatic progress in a relatively short time. She's regularly praised Mississippi as the standard for realizing statistical significant changes through applying a strategic top-down approach combined with grassroots initiatives to bring awareness to the need for change. According to Louisa, it is evident that this united effort, which has been more unified in Mississippi than in any other state effort that I've seen, can truly impact student achievement on a large scale. Even during Reading First, there may have been a contingent in the State Department doing a remarkable job of implementation. Still, when it got pushed out to districts and schools, even small groups of holdouts could undercut progress. There can be so many forces arrayed against the successful implementation statewide. And that's what makes the dramatic progress in Mississippi so impressive. While I am sure that there are many more accomplished writers in our state, there are none more passionate about literacy than me. This book's goal is to share the tale of those who, like me, have spent countless hours and thousands of dollars out of our own pockets to become the best teachers of reading. Today, it is truly the story of a highly qualified reading educator who has changed the trajectory of our state, far more than any curriculum or any law. It can provide the impetus for systems change, but the driving force has to be, and it has always been, highly motivated teachers knowing how to change lives through literacy. Telling the story is essential to all who want to emulate our success and ensure that Mississippi does not rest on her laurels. There is work left to be done, and the passionate teacher must continue to do it. We are the change makers, and I hope we are the dreamers for a better tomorrow. I am uniquely positioned to tell this story. I was educated in Mississippi, but I had the experience of completing elementary school in Rhode Island. I graduated from 3 different Mississippi universities. I studied at Vanderbilt University, and I taught adjunct classes across state lines. While my time in an elementary classroom may have been brief, I have been a general education teacher in grades 2 through 8, a special education teacher in resource and inclusion settings, an interventionist in public, private, and parochial settings. My varied background provides me with a lens that's different from many of my peers, and I use this lens to view the changes that have been wrought over the years. And I have the colleagues who can assist me to tell this tale. A narrator's voice is always tinges history, but with so many voices of so many educators ringing in my ears, many that are just a call or an email away, this Mississippi story will ring true for all who listen and all who read. I hope I do our story justice, and that those educators and researchers with whom I've worked beside all these years see it as an insightful picture of the journey that we've taken together. So join me next week on Monday for Mississippi Rising Mondays as we journey through the story of Mississippi, each week, chapter at a time. Until then, reading is a human right. See you next time.